And with me in studio now is Mr. Sterling Scott. He is the CEO of Grow Life Incorporated, company stock symbols PHOT. Always a pleasure to see you, Sterling.
Good morning. Very nice to see you.
Now, we were having a little bit of a conversation before going on the air, and you've just launched an investor presentation at your website, growlifeinc.com. Tell us about that.
Well, I think it will be interesting to your viewers. It will provide just one more avenue to understanding in a little bit more detail what this ambitious company, Grow Life, is up to. And we will make on our best efforts basis to keep it updated, but there's a lot of information available on the core company and the direction we're going, and hopefully it'll be well received by investors.
Well, now, the company has created a lot of news, and of course, the news about the industry has just been burgeoning, everywhere on the internet. As a lot of it happened, exploded, obviously, as a result of those elections back in November, where Colorado and Washington basically legalized not only medical marijuana, but recreational marijuana. I mean, you must feel like you're a surfer riding the crest of a tsunami.
We are, and we are an extremely ambitious company. We see the opportunity for a public company to, and it may seem like a stretch, but it's one that we're engaged in every day. There's an opportunity for a public company to become the first billion-dollar market cap company in this space that's really dedicated to medical marijuana. We would like to be that company.
Well, you must feel, I think we've mentioned this on the program before, but you must feel in the same place that people felt 80 years ago when Prohibition came to an end. I mean, we almost feel like that's happening with this industry sector as well.
It's going to move slowly. I think we've seen a major shift in the last 6 months, which has geometrically expanded what we regard as our opportunities. But like a lot of major societal changes, we expect it to have times where it steps back a little bit and then it goes forward. But generally, we see the federal government being willing to allow the experimentation with medical marijuana, at least, to continue in the states. And that's where most of our business is.
Well, the biggest motivation for the governments is the fact that, the federal government spends about $20 billion a year keeping it illegal. And they have now realized that they can earn about $60 to $70 billion a year in revenues from licensing it. That's a major turnaround.
Well, I think on both sides of the aisle, the Democrats and the Republicans, somebody ought to be, looking at the math. Who is it that once said, a billion here, a billion there, it starts to be real money? Yeah. Well, there may be a swing that is as much as 100 billion.
Right.
If the federal government and the states listen to what's happening with the voters and take a rational approach. I think they've already, to a large extent, recognized that the gateway drug theory, discounting and criminalizing marijuana is not sustainable. It was probably ill-conceived in the beginning. It's certainly ill-conceived today. But if you can move past some of those old biases, and we assume that the government guys will actually run some of the numbers. They've certainly run them in Colorado and Washington.
Of course.
The California guys are sort of interested. There's a huge net swing, and it puts the country, as to marijuana policy, on a constructive, positive. Can we actually start looking at those therapeutic applications, which are so important? I would hope we can, as a country.
Well, it's an interesting case study, because I think you mentioned on the program last week that when there's a social change, it's usually led by the young people. But in this particular case, this social change is being led by folks who are no longer young.
It seems to me that there's a huge I'm a baby boomer, Don, and I think you are a baby boomer as well. And most of us grew up with the notion that marijuana was not something that you talk to your parents about.
Right.
But we also never believed that it was a gateway drug and the next thing we're going to be doing is heroin. We found it to be interesting as kids. Well, now those kids are largely in control of the finances of our country, and they have a much more rational and I think sensible approach.
Sure.
And it's reflected in the Pew polls. And it's reflected in what's happening in the legislatures across the country.
Once again, Grow Life Incorporated, PHOT is their symbol. Visit the website growlifeinc.com for that presentation. Sterling, thanks so much.
Thank you, Don.